I'm just kind of talking because I don't like to just cold ask questions.
Totally. Yeah.
So I would love to know about your family. I don't remember if you have kids or not, Tony, but you know you have a wife.
Yeah.
So maybe tell me a little bit about that, who you are personally.
I am Kelsey's husband, first and foremost.
Awesome.
And we
How
are
long
celebrating 10 years this December.
Awesome.
And we just started the process of pursuing adoption. So infertility has been a frustrating part of our story, and tried for about 5 years, and Kelsey had a procedure that was supposed to help, and it didn't end up helping. And so we did a lot of prayer and like counseling and healing and like just not wanting to put all that grief on whoever we might welcome into our home. And we just felt a lot of peace this last September to be like, I think we need to pursue this full steam ahead. And so, so we're adopting. We're doing the private adoption route. DHS in Oregon won't place a kid with a family unless the parents are like 100% LGBTQ affirming. And so what we were hoping would be like a $2,000 process has turned into like a $50,000 process. And so we are fundraising, in the process of fundraising right now, and like just like hoping the Lord will provide in that way. And
this despite the fact you would be well equipped to love a kid.
Isn't that silly?
It's probably better equipped than most.
And I said that to the worker. I was like, I told him a little bit of my story, and I was like, we would never like kick them out or send them to a camp or like any of that stuff. And even if they disagreed with us, like we'd still want them in our home and love them and like parent them and not other them in any way. But they're working with a lot of, I think, are antiquated stats and data and stories about the world that are sad and unfortunate. And so that was I don't know, that was a moment of a lot of anger for us. Yeah. We had to take that to the Lord and just like, because it's not just us that excludes. That excludes like Muslim parents and Orthodox Jew parents and immigrants from Southeast Asia and like anybody who doesn't embrace kind of a postmodern sexual ethic. Like it's exclusive to all of them.
Feels a little bit totalitarian. Honestly.
Yeah, it totally does.
Without room for plurality or diversity that you would hope for.
Yeah. As for living in a state, you guys technically in Washington, but it's not all that different. That really, really prioritizes inclusivity and like diversity and pluralism, and it's just a really sad way of modeling that. And it's like you can disagree with, you can be diverse as long as you think exactly like us. Is kind of how it feels, and and that's something that my wife and I, like just with my story, we like bump into that a lot, like just a lot of like sometimes in the church, like not a lot of space for me, and if I'm going to be honest, like and then outside the church, it's like this weird like it's
not a lot of space.
Too gay for the church, not gay enough for outside the church. Like it's like
sure, that's a good place to kind of start in understanding this. Where'd you go to school and where'd you grow up, if you don't mind me asking?
I born and raised in Springfield, Oregon.
Okay.
So graduated from Springfield High School in 2010. I went to Calvary Chapel University.
Baby.
I know, right? But I'm getting gray. Just pointing it out. So planting a church.
You and our worship pastor, Jesse, it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, old man.
Went to Calvary Chapel University for Bible college, and then did a little bit of time at Bushnell University studying psychology, and then now, because I'm just a glutton for punishment, I'm at Western Seminary getting my master's in biblical leadership. So
nice.
Yeah, that's kind of education background.
Do you mind me asking if you grew up in Foursquare, or is it?
No, did not. No, I grew up in Open Bible.
Yeah, I know Open Bible. That we're kissing cousins anyways.
Yeah. Grew up Pentecostal charismatic.
Which is strong in Eugene.
Yes, very strong in Eugene.
Yeah.
There's like 4 robust Open Bible churches in the area, and then I've learned since that as you grow out, it's not as robust of a presence. So they got something sweet going on there in Eugene to Springfield.
Yeah, that's awesome. Glad to know your story about that. Well, I first felt like I got to know you. I don't think it was exactly mutual through the cohort on sexuality that Elijah and I were part of this fall. Do you remember the actual name?
Compass.
Okay, thank you. Apparently, Elijah would probably say I didn't go enough times to remember all the details. I had a few conflicts. But I was there when you shared your story. I was moved to tears. And there were several pieces of it that I felt were so compelling that I really wanted BG4, whom I love very much, to have the opportunity to hear a little bit of your story, especially as it relates to our topic today, which is God loves LGBTQ plus, and the church.
Yeah.
So if you could tell us, I'd just like to open it for you to tell us about a bit of your story like you did in Compass.
Yeah. I'll just start, and then if there's any point where you're like, share a little more of this, or feel free to interrupt me, it won't hurt my feelings. But I grew up in wonderful home with a mom and dad who loved Jesus and a little brother, and they raised us in church and super, super devoted. And my parents were of the kind of brand of Christianity that was very influenced by kind of evangelical politics, and so we had faith and politics hand in hand, and never the two shall part.
Were you homeschooled?
Yes. Does it show?
So was I.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Homeschooled until high school.
I'm getting you.
Yeah, my people. Yes. So we that was a big part of it, and that's important because in 2004. Massachusetts became the first state in the country to legalize gay marriage in their state.
I remember where I was when I saw the headline.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the Bush administration at that same time was trying to propose the Defense of Marriage Act, which we could vote on to define marriage as being between a man and a woman nationally. Not having it be a state's issue, but having it be a national issue. And people have their opinions about all that and whether or not you should legislate your theology on people. And I'm not speaking into that, but what I am saying is that my family took the approach of, oh no, we got to combat this. We've got to fight for Jesus to protect God's vision of sex and marriage. And so when the culture got really anxious around Massachusetts becoming the first state, this bill being proposed, all of this anxiety was in the air when it came to this topic. And it was in this exact same year that I realized that I was not heterosexual. You were
what, 11 or 12?
I was 11 years old when I first started having questions, 12 years old in 2004 when I realized oh man, this is
a thing.
This is a thing, and I don't think it's going away. And so when I found this out about myself, it started with just noticing my friends around me were starting to develop crushes on girls, and I just was not repulsed, but just not into that at all. Yeah, they were fun to pick on and throw rocks at, but I didn't want them to be my girlfriend. And then once I realized oh my gosh, I think these feelings that they're having for girls, I'm feeling towards one of them, one of my guy friends, and tried not to spend too much time thinking about it, didn't know what was normal and what people experienced. And then I started having a series of just not sexual dreams, but just intimate romantic dreams with this friend, and realizing oh man, this is not just going to go away. And ended up having my first sexual experience with this friend in particular at church camp. My youth pastor at the time, in all his infinite wisdom, thought that we were such a good group of boys that we didn't need a counselor in our cabin.
I've actually been there. I wasn't the youth pastor, I was the kid.
Okay, yeah, and shorthand of staff, and we're just trying to make it all work. And it led to this. It sounds like an episode of South Park, that I would have my first sexual experience at church camp, and
I think some people around here might relate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's more normal than we think, and that's a whole nother issue that could be looked at. But I came home.
We're a lot better these days at supervision. I just want to speak to the parents and say that we take it very, very seriously. Because we've been there and we learned.
Yeah, totally. So I came home from camp, I'm going to camp my whole life, and remembering, since I was 6 years old, and always coming back from camp with that camp high. You encountered God, and you're home in cloud nine. And for me, it was the exact opposite this year. I come home, and I felt when I was hugging my mom and dad, a billion miles away from them. And I remember thinking at that point when I was 12, thinking this is going to be the death of me. This is going to kill me. And part of the reason.
Why did you think that?
Yeah. Part of the reason for that was I didn't hear, we're storied creatures, human beings. The stories we believe about the world shape how we live in the world. And so the stories that I had been told about what it meant to be somebody who experienced same-sex attraction were either that you were going to give into this and like that you were going to become an abomination to God and your family and unworthy of love and belonging, or like you were going to just stuff it down and hide it for as long as you could, or you kill yourself. And those were like all I knew as options.
Those are your options.
Because I knew the stuff it down option because I was like, I have to pick that option, and I can't be the only one on this planet who's doing that. But yeah, so that was, I felt like those are my three options. And what was why I thought this would be the death of me is like the feelings of fear and alienation and shame were like so visceral that it didn't feel like a livable way to do life, to just keep like pushing it down. And I remember like watching this movie that hardly anybody see. I've always been super into movies. And so like even as a teenager, watching this movie called Far From Heaven with Julianne Moore. And then the story, like she's this like idyllic housewife in the 1950s and her finds out her husband is gay and like walks in on his office with him kissing another dude and like thinking like, oh my gosh, that's I'm doomed for that to be my life. Like I'm going to get married and I'm going to like keep it all together as best as possible. But when I saw that movie, it told me the story of like, there is no keeping it together. Like this monster's coming out. And I started developing this thought pattern of like, if I can't keep this together, it's better to not be alive. It's better to not do that to God and to do that to my mom and my dad. And that's kind of the distorting, I would say, demonic nature of shame, is that it so distorts your vision of reality that you start to think crazy thoughts like it would be better, my God and my family would be happier if I were dead than if I admitted that I struggle with this.
I just want to stop and say that phrase has echoed in my heart and my brain since I first heard you say that.
The shame piece?
Yeah, I'm a mom and I feel that way towards a lot of people, not just my own kids.
Yeah.
And just the thought that kids would be thinking better to be dead than to be gay, that just, it kind of wrecked me.
Yeah. I love like your tenderness towards that, and I think that's a sign that the world I grew up in is not the world totally that exists today, right? Because we met on a Zoom call with a whole bunch of other pastors who are trying their best to like think through these things. So I think it's a much more hopeful time than early 2000s. But nonetheless, like that was the world I was born into, and so I went from like just being a really sweet, open, tender-hearted kid who just like cried easy and like really affectionate and really that kid that would like make sure that all of the friends were included and go grab chairs for people who got left out of lunch and all that kind of stuff. And I went from being that, and I was public schooled starting high school, to a really aggressive, quite violent, really dark, really depressed, really anxious, really just like cut off from the world. I use this picture to describe like it felt like I was like stuck in this like glass cube where I could be there and see and hear everything that was going on, but I couldn't I wasn't actually there. Like I was cut off and alienated in some way. And by the time I got to my sophomore year of high school, I had decided that it would be best to I wasn't going to be able, this was not a livable situation anymore. And I was right about that. Like, that's not a livable way to just be hiding and feeling alienated from everybody. But I was wrong in thinking that the only solution meant taking my life. And so by this point I had a number of not anything R-rated encounters, but just intimate encounters with people of the same sex that signaled to me okay, something, this is you're not gonna, you just got to go. It's kind of how my thought felt and my thought process was. So my parents went to bed one night. We're actually really, really close to the 16-year anniversary of this night. And when my parents went to bed, I snuck into our my parents' guest room, where my dad kept his revolver and his bullets. And I took his gun and I loaded his gun, and I went into my bedroom and sat there weighing out just the pros and cons of it. And even it's weird to think of a 16-year-old having that much clarity, but like just thinking through like, okay, you've done this hiding thing for 4 years. It's not going to get better. Your parents are going to hear the gunshot. Your dad's going to be the one to walk into the room because your mom's going to be too freaked out. And like just trying to weigh through what they're going to see and then still deciding that is better.
It's so brutal.
Isn't that weird?
That you were that clear-headed about it.
And that's, for people who are on the edge of suicide, they tend to be clear-headed about it.
Yeah.
Like there tends to be this really silent resolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I waited for a little bit. I don't think I tried praying, but I think looking back, I was like, the stall was like, come on, God, like intervene somehow. Obviously I don't want this. And at about, I don't remember the time. I don't exactly remember the time. Like it was late at night. I got a phone call from one of the youth staff at the youth group that I was a part of. And I was like, he's never called me this late before. And so I had the little flip phone, answer my phone. And I'm like, hey, dude. And he said, Tony, like I was thinking about you today. And I was just really, really overcome with a heavy heart for you. And
What time was it?
this was like anywhere between midnight and 2 a.m. Like it's late.
And you guys are like 14-year-olds.
He's not. He's like 19, 20 at the time. He's one of my youth leaders.
Okay.
And he was like...
Keep going.
Yeah. And I was 16 at the time. And he was like, and I didn't know. He said, so I figured I'd call you. If you didn't answer, no big deal. But if you did, like I just wanted you to know that like God has you on my heart. And I'm praying for you. And he said, I want you to read Psalm 5. And so he reads to me Psalm 5, which talks about like David expressing his tears and his sorrow to the Lord and how in the morning the Lord will hear his cry. And he was like, Tony, like God hears you and like God sees you and he's there for you and he wants you. Like and he said, I don't know what's going on, but I just know that you need to know that, like that you are not cut off from God. And I like kind of kept it together and I was just like, oh, wow, Ruth, thank you so much. I didn't tell him anything about the gun, certainly didn't tell him about my sexual struggles, and hung up the phone and put the gun on my nightstand and was kind of like shocked and just like couldn't believe that had happened, and got up to go into my kitchen to get a drink of water. And on my mom's windowsill, she had this kind of crystal cross. And like the way that the porch light or the moonlight or sunlight was shining through it, like it was just particularly luminescent. Like it was just like kind of rainbowy color and just like really, really pretty. And I felt like in that moment, like the Holy Spirit just downloaded into me, because of what I've done on this cross, nothing stands between you and me except my love for you. Like all that exists in this relationship is my love for you. And it's like I did all the yeah buts. Yeah, but I've been praying for you for 4 years to take this away, and you haven't taken it away. And yeah, but like, what happens if this, and what happens if that? And he just said, just like, I promise you, like if you just follow me with everything you have, like you're going to have a life that is as fulfilling as you hope it will be. And he reiterated to me that your desires do not condemn you. Like the things that you want, that you're not like... the desires of, I don't know if the desires of your heart's the right term, but the impression that I got was that like my sexual brokenness didn't stamp me as done with God and God done with me.
Yeah.
And that was like a big changing moment for me. Like that was when I stopped self-harm. That's when I stopped with the suicidal ideation. I just went from like kind of dark, grungy, violent kid to just like Jesus freak on campus. Like just like leading a Bible study on campus and like just crazy stuff. And going to Bible college after graduating high school and going into ministry. And for years I wouldn't talk to anybody, didn't tell anybody about what was going on with the struggles that I had that didn't get healed. Like it's not like I was zapped heterosexual. Like it was just, I was zapped with the holiness of God and like the love of God in my heart. And while like, it wasn't always safe to talk about it at church or with friends, God always like felt like a safe place to process this stuff with, to just like take the crushes that would come and like the desires that would come and the temptations that would come and just continually bring that to the feet of Jesus and know that I was not being met with shame or rejection or finger waving, that I belonged with him. And that so because I belonged with him, I could take those things with him. And so yeah, I don't know how much more to go.
So,
like that's
so So incredibly powerful. A phrase came to mind that I spent a lot of time on this week. My husband and I just got back from a counseling intensive that was really pivotal for us as a couple. And one phrase we talked about a lot was connection before correction.
Oh.
In marriage. That like when you want to straighten out the way your spouse is thinking, the first thing you got to do is listen to them all the way out and let them and connect, and then that stuff becomes much easier.
Yeah.
And I think I hear that same thing in your story, that God met you with connection.
Yeah.
And what needed to be perhaps redirected, healed in your life, it just wasn't possible until you were met with embrace and connection.
Absolutely. It almost became, that's not that I ever was like, oh, well, I can just go be in relationships with guys now.
Yeah.
But it almost became like a non-issue. Like in the sense of like
if
we're
I'm
so
disconnected with Jesus, this is a...
Yeah.
Because that, honestly, some issues we were working on, we felt that way. If we're connected, this is not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And so people asked like, well, you're married, and like, how does that work? And some of that's just like a little voyeuristic and none of your business. But like this, like,
fair.
Yeah. but it's a valid question. Like there's also like a validity to that. Or in our world, like it is. We live in a very like Freudian world, and if you don't know, like Freud's work is very much like that. Every single person is driven by repressed sexual desires, straight or not straight or whatever, and every bad habit that a person has or form of self-destruction that they have is those sexual desires being repressed. And so Freud.
So that's the ultimate sin.
And the ultimate sin is to say no to your sexual desires. And Freud's theories have been debunked by and large. I mean, and we can get into like all the pivotal thinkers.
A lot of thinking.
But it is like the gospel of today. Like you do you is like, or else you will like fall apart. Is like people are evangelistic about it, and so people meet me and like they're either like I get a privilege to go talk about this a lot and help people think theologically about this stuff and relationally and all that stuff, and like so I'll either get met with like. Well, you haven't let God totally heal you all the way because you're still claiming to be same-sex attracted, or like you're hurting yourself by saying no to these desires. And what would be best for you and your wife would be for either you to do like some polyamorous agreement or for you to just cut and run. And I love what the way of Jesus models is like this really messy middle ground that like has room for our mess and our dysfunctions and our flaws and all the ways we're less than perfect, and continues to call us forward into Christ's likeness. And
what's interesting about what you're saying is how many married people could claim that there are no sexual issues affecting their monogamy. And so maybe they should just give up.
Yeah, exactly.
Like what?
Yeah.
Why does that only apply one way?
Precisely.
And so I'm wondering if you could talk right now directly. I know that in any group of people, there are people that are at different places about this, but a group that's really on my heart are people that might also struggle with same-sex attraction and have dealt with shame around that. And just, if you could just speak to them for a minute.
Yeah.
Especially younger people, but any age.
I think the first thing that I would want to say is there's not a thing you can do to make God love you less, and there's not a thing you can do to make God love you more. You are loved perfectly by your Creator, that you were made on purpose, that you are not a defect, that you are not somebody who should spend the rest of your life in hiding and secrecy and in shame, that you are worthy of love and belonging, first and foremost. But the thing I would also want to say on the other side of that is, having had a lot of friends who had similar stories to me and chose a different path than me, some friends who did get married and then choose to leave their wives and kind of believe the narrative of like, you are hurting yourself if you don't say yes to every impulse. I would just caution you to weigh out the wisdom of that and examine the fruit of that. Not what you see on social media, examine the fruit of what you see in your day-to-day lives. Do you see parents or friends who are pursuing those things and living in that way? who are happy, flourishing, healthy people who are not burning bridges, who are not living selfishly, who are not making themselves the center of the universe. And I would argue that I don't know anybody that way. So my hope, my appeal to you is that this piece, that your unconditional belovedness, like that out of that space, that would drive you to say, I am worthy of finding the wisest way to live in this world, and seeking that out through Scripture, through the way of Jesus, through your pastors, and through trusted relationships.
Oh, that's so powerful. And my last question, and we rightfully took the time on this story, but if you could speak, a lot of people in our congregation may know, as I've known in the past, that I'm not interacting with the LGBTQ plus community in the best way possible. That there are things that I wish I had done better. Yeah. Can you talk to us about how Christians interact with the LGBT community, and just some things we could consider and think ways that we can do better with our friends and family?
Yeah. C.S. Lewis has this idea in The Weight of Glory. It's an essay he wrote. And he talks about how if we were able to actually see human beings the way that God sees human beings, we would have no choice but to fall down and worship. Yeah. And what he means by that is not like human beings are God and should be worshiped, but that the image of God, when properly understood, is so profound. Yeah. That the response is worship. Mm-hmm. So let's take that idea and apply that to the LGBTQ community. I understand that there are ideologies in this that are really alarming, that I'm alarmed by. And I understand that there are politics surrounding this that are not insignificant. But when you are talking on social media or in person, at church, at your workplace, with somebody who identifies themselves within the LGBTQ community, you are first and foremost talking to an image bearer of God. Amen. You're not talking to an ideology. You're not talking to a news headline. You're not talking to a TikTok. You're talking to a person that Jesus deemed worthy of dying for. And that is our primary posture towards all of humanity. And if we can't have that posture towards those people because we're afraid of what the ideologies they've bought into might do to our friends, our family, our church, or our country, then we might have to surrender some of those things and realize, man, my value system is a little out of place because I'm not agreeing with God about this person's value. I'm afraid of them. I'm not loving them. So that's what I would say.
That's powerful. I just wanted to thank you for your testimony of following Jesus, counting the cost. It's something that I hope for all of us. And I don't think there's anybody that doesn't deal with sexual brokenness.
Right.
You just kind of get to lead with it a little bit and just get it out of the way. And secondly, what that means, even if we're not dealing with that particular issue, I'm learning from you about what it means to be a follower of Jesus, who is willing to lay down anything that Jesus asked me to lay down, and that call to holiness, and that coming from a place of belovedness. Yeah. So I just appreciate you as a person and as a pastor and leader, and I thank you so much for sharing your story with our church.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I also want to say, what you're doing, not by having me here, not like that, but just by taking time to say, the way that the church has historically handled this issue has been less than perfect, and we want to do better going forward, without just buying into the cultural narratives, what they would prescribe. So important, and every time I meet a pastor like you or Elijah or some of our many friends in Foursquare, I'm just filled with so much hope, because at the end of the day, this isn't just hurt feelings or not hurt feelings. There's a real significant cost to missing this and to just sweeping it under the rug. And so we can't afford to be ostriches. And I'm just really happy and honored to have been a part of this and thankful that you're having this conversation.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Of course, it feels like we're cutting short, but I know we got to fit it in some of
I know, I'm